headlines at 9 p.m. It's a raw deal for women as gender inequality widens across the world. A report by the World Economic Forum shows the gap has increased for the first time in many years, adding that it could take over 200 years to achieve parity between the two sexes. Nothing to cheer for India, which is ranked a poor 108 in a list of 144 countries.
Prime Minister Modi launches a scathing attack on the Congress in poll-bound Himachal Pradesh, says the grand old party has become a laughing club and it is high time its leaders did an introspection. Takes the drive at Rahul Gandhi, stating he is questioning the government on matters that any Indian would be proud of.
Kamal Hassan creates a political storm with his comments on right-wing Hindu terror. Congress grabs the opportunity to slam the government even as the BJP objects to the term, saying the actor must apologize for his comments against Hindus aimed at making petty political gains.
It's a big ET now exclusive. Unhappy over the dividend it received from the Reserve Bank of India, the union government is likely to nudge the central bank to pay approximately 13,000 crore rupees more as special dividend. Also wants the banking regulator to participate and put some part over and above the recapitalization that has been planned for public sector banks.
Government looks to fire up the core sector as it looks to pump prime the economy. ET now learns that the centre is likely to pump in big money into housing, highways and rural development in a bid to push growth.
RelJio is set to shake up the mobile handset market now. ET now learns that Mukesh Ambani's flagship telecom venture is getting ready to take on the Chinese handset makers with its own version of smartphones worth 1,500 rupees only. Kickstarts negotiations with 7 Indian vendors to produce 100 handsets over the next 1 year.
And former private equity specialist Jerome Powell is set to be named the next US Fed chairman. White House sources suggest that President Donald Trump has already communicated his decision to Powell, who will be the first non-economist to head the Fed since the 80s. An official announcement expected later tonight. Good evening, it's 9 p.m. This is the India development debate. It's not easy being a woman and the situation is only getting worse. In a big wake-up call to governments and private companies, the latest Gender Gap Index report by the World Economic Forum has revealed some shocking statistics on bias against women. India, which just raised a toast to be a part of the top 100 club in ease of doing business, has slipped 21 positions at 108 out of a list of 144 countries. What is most shocking is that we fare at a dismal 139 on economic participation for women. So is economic development in India all male-centric?
Indeed, I'm a woman and I feel very, very strongly about this very issue. How can we justify the high number of capable, smart women going out of workforce or not joining it all together? Are women paying a price for their childbearing role? Why can't women make a comeback after they take a break from their work? Why are women paid a lot less for the same job that a man does, like she does too? And why should there be such few women in leadership roles? This isn't just a debate, it is an emotive issue and we are glad to take it up right here on the India Development Debate this evening. I'm Supriya, Shrinate in New Delhi, and joining me in Mumbai is my colleague Sandeep. Gurumurthi. We're keeping the phone lines open on this debate so that you can come in, call in and make your point, ask your questions and make those calls.
Well, it's been barely 2 days since India broke into the elite 100 on the World Bank's Ease of Doing Business rankings. And now we've got news, let's just say, that we hadn't hoped for. India has fallen 21 places in the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Equality Report. We've slipped to an abysmal 108, as you can see, in a 144 nation list. So what's gone wrong, you ask? Well, India's greatest challenge is in the area of economic participation. Simply put, it means that for the same job, men in our country get paid a lot more than women do. So we have to ask ourselves, after 3 decades of equal pay laws, why the discrimination still? Well, the report also points out that on an average, 66% of women's work in India is unpaid compared to just 12% of men's. India did not perform too well in the health and survival pillar either, where we've come in at 141. That's the 4th lowest in the world. But there's some good news as well, because we fully managed to close the gap in the primary and secondary education enrollment, and this is now for a 2nd year in a row. We've also maintained our global top 20 ranking on the political empowerment sub-index. Well, of course, it's been 50 years since we had our first woman prime minister, and so you could say the time has come for a new generation of female political leadership. Let's also get you the bigger picture, zoom out, tell you what the rest of the world's rankings are looking like. Iceland remains the world's most gender equal country. In fact, the top 3 countries in the index, as you can see, are all Nordic. Among the non-European ones, in the top 10, you've got Rwanda, and at number 10 stands Philippines. But here's what I want to leave you with. The writing on the wall is very clear. Gender equality in the world is increasing. The World Economic Forum, in fact, has said that the global gender gap will take 100 years. You heard that right, 100 years to close if things remain the same. And it's going to get worse for women like Supriya and me in the workplace, where the gender divide, if estimates are anything to go by, will take 217 years to close. Well, is that the world you want to live in? Think about it.
Well, and so to discuss this debate, we've got an amazing panel. Frankly, viewers, we couldn't have asked for better minds to join us on the show this evening. Joining us on the show, Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw, ranked as one of the most powerful women, not just in the country, but in the world. Also joining us on the show this evening, Anuja Chauhan, an author, very famous author, Aba Singh, senior lawyer, and we've got Miss Lalita Kumar Mangalam, who is, of course, from National Council for Women, spokesperson for the BJP. Priyanka Chaturvedi from the Congress joins in as well for this power-packed debate on the show this evening. Ms. Kumar Mangalam, I'm going to start off with you first. You know, we were at 98 in 2006. In 2016, we were at 87, and now we've slipped to 108. This is a week when we celebrated India's rapid strides in the ease of doing business index. But this is a shocking sort of development as far as empowering women is concerned. Who do you think is to be blamed? What is to be blamed?
You know, one of the things is that we need to take the statistics in a proper perspective. I'm not saying that we haven't slipped or that it is quite shameful, the rank that we are at. But earlier it was out of 107 or 8 nations, now it's 144. Having said that, let me say that the statistics are quite dismal and very disappointing. There has been a slight improvement, I think, in primary and mid-level education, but higher education is still has very poor statistics with regard to women in this country. But what has really hit us badly is our record on health and nutrition. It's abysmal in this country, and I think one of the main reasons behind also the fact that women even today in this country, apart from obviously the existing patriarchal mores and hierarchy, culture, etc., is the fact that most women in this country work in the unpaid informal sector, where their work is not even considered work. For example, agriculture, related fields like aquaculture, sericulture and all of that. Also, all are domestic workers. I am not talking about housewives, I am talking about domestic workers. Also, everybody who works, many people who work in the textile sector, for example, who work out of home, you will see them all over the country, regardless of caste or creed. You will see them all over the country. The fact is that women are very poorly paid in this country. I think about, you know, the gender wage gap is also appalling, and you see women have suffered for years under the patriarchal mores of not just India, but since we are talking only about India, let's restrict ourselves to Indian women. And today we are paying the price for it.
Right.
The number of and the percentage of women in the workforce, in the formal workforce, has dropped. That is something that we really need to pay attention to. I mean, having said that, I think there are lots of other panelists also on it. But let me say that, you know, this is not something that can be solved by a government or by, you know, a particular party, etc. This is not political. This is a social malaise which we really need to pay more attention to. We need to give women credit in this country for actually being productive. We are not, the objects of merely charity, that is government handed out doles. Our contribution must be accepted, and we need to also look at it from the point of view of women's rights.
Right. Ms. Kumar Mangalam, you made opening comments there, and I think some of that is very, very relevant. I'm glad this is not you're acknowledging this is not a political debate. This isn't a political topic. This is about half of India. How can this be political? Let's not politicize it. And I'm glad you said that at the onset. And I'm glad you have a panel that can speak on this issue without political biases. Priyanka Chaturvedi, though, let me ask you this question. Ms. Kumar Mangalam did point out the economic participation of women, and let me just point out a data. The CSO data in India says that India's female workforce participation rate dropped from a 35 in 1990 to 27 in 2016. What will you blame this on? Do you believe governments, and successive governments, not this, not yours, successive governments over the years, perhaps failed to be proactive in incentivizing women in the workforce? Were there lack of proactive initiatives to get women involved in economic participation?
Absolutely. So there are many factors that go into the reason behind these fall, the fall that we see, and it is very unfortunate that women, being the 50% of the population, are not seen as equal economic participants in the country. So this is a cause for worry, and factors that I see are safety issues, then working environment issues, then various other issues that keep them away from workforce, whether it is to do with family support, societal support, etc. That is all that we need to consider every time we look at these rate of drops that we are seeing. So that is one point of concern, and policies need to be initiated which are targeted specifically to the women workforce. And I am very certain if we increase the economic participation of women, we are going to see an impact on the country's economy as well, and I think there are statistics to prove that. So any government, and irrespective of the political party, it needs to focus on its women-centric policies. It's appalling to see how we are denied participation in country's economy, we are denied participation in political space, policy making space. So these are spaces which need to open up, and that can only happen through A, government interventions, B, societal changes, and governments introducing these societal changes and expecting that change to come from there. So only when we see that, we are going to see a better ranking, better positioning of women in society. That is where I definitely feel we are lagging, and there is no cohesive effort from all sections to bring it all together and give women the due that they deserve.
Okay, you've raised a valid point. Ms. Kiran Mazumdar, let me bring it to you, and let's address the elephant in the room, because what this survey clearly points out is the problem primarily, or one of the key issues, is the lack of economic participation, the fact that there isn't enough opportunity. Because one of the success stories is that India has managed to bridge the gap when it comes to primary and secondary education, bridge the gender gap when it comes to primary and secondary education. So education as such is not so much of a problem as it is the lack of opportunity, or maybe a patriarchal mindset. What do you think, to your mind, is the reason why they have not been able to participate in the economic growth? What do you think is the reason why we are ranked at 139 out of 144 countries when it comes to economic participation of women?
So actually, we can't take away from the fact that there is a lot of gender inequity when it comes to empowering women and their inclusion in the economic model. And also, we must even look at it in context with the fact that a country like Bangladesh fares much better than India when it comes to including women in the economic arena. So I think there is much to be thought about, because I think there are societal factors, there are policy factors. But having said that, I would say that let's look at some of the recent policy measures that we have taken. One of them is this whole aspect of a much more generous maternity leave, which I think is one of the reasons why a lot of women basically have to take a long sabbatical or even leave their jobs for basically raising their families. I think this new maternity leave law that has been adopted hopefully will encourage more women to remain in the formal sector, because we have seen a huge drop in women in the formal sector, which is very worrying. When it comes to the informal sector, I think there is a huge wage gap, as you know, I think Lalita pointed out earlier on, which has to be corrected. You cannot be exploiting women in the workplace, whether it's the informal sector or the formal sector. So when we want to bridge this gender gap, we also have to bridge many other gaps that go with gender inequity. You know, I think health is a very neglected sector. I think women's health is a very underinvested sector when it comes to, you know, addressing this particular issue. I think when it comes to you know, the other aspects, I think at a grassroots level, if you look at it, I think the fact that we score well on political inclusion when it comes to women is a positive sign. But then we must make sure that this goes all the way up to the parliament, which doesn't happen. And it's almost sort of reflective of what happens to women in the workplace. If you look at corporate India, again at a grassroots level, there is a large representation of women, but when it comes to leadership, there is a thinning out. So I think there needs to be affirmative action in various ways. Policy making is extremely important, both from a corporate diversity policy point of view and of course a government policy point of view. So I think it would augur very well if Niti Aayog and other policy makers could actually look at this gender gap.
Oh, absolutely. And we'll touch upon some of those issues, leadership and why is there such a vacuum right at the top for women, and also equal way and equal pay in just a bit from now. But I want to take this quickly to Abha Singh. And Abha Singh, will you agree that economic development in our country, and especially given the statistics they are, I mean, one thing is the report that has come in which says 139 out of 144 on economic participation. But look at the CMIE data which says in the first 4 months of 2017, jobs for men increased by 0.9 million, but 2.4 million women fell off the employment radar, employment map. That does tell you that economic development in this country is perhaps very male-centric.
Absolutely. In fact, if you see the jobs all over, be it the defense services, in fact, now they are opening up for women. Even in other sectors, women are very few. Even the competitions, if you see, even in the prime civil services, barely 10 to 12% are women. If you come in the judiciary, it is worse. There are hardly 5% judges in the Supreme Court who are women. In fact, when the Triple Talaq bench sat, there was not a single woman. They were all 6 men. And it were the men who were deciding the fate of the women. So definitely the economic participation is very low. In the unorganized sector also, because they get low salaries, they don't get flexi hours, they are exploited. Lot of women stay away, they don't join, and even those who come are exploited. So it's really dismal. Job creation, when there is so much unemployment, India being a misogynistic country, I think they are more focused on getting jobs for men than for women. That is one reason. What is more worrying for me is the health sector. I mean, when I was going through the figures, I find that 5 women die every hour in the maternal mortality sector during childbirth. We account for 17% of deaths globally, and that is the state of affairs of women. And which are the best 5 countries? They are Finland, Iceland, Sweden, and these are the countries who have fared well in the gender gap statistics. Worst are India, which is 176. So I think these figures are very relevant, and the government cannot shirk itself, because the government spending in health, health sector, in education sector is pathetic. We have not focused on these things, and the result is this. It is scary, it is worrying that we have slipped so many places in 1 year. I think the BJP NCW chairperson should take it seriously rather than just quoting figures. I think the government needs to wake up, because you can't have
43% of the children who are stunted, who have a muscle wastage, who are underdeveloped being born in India. These are the figures which we all know, but we are not working on it at all.
You know, we don't want to politicize the debate, but you've made some valid points. Let me take this to Anuja Chauhan, who of course, you know, brings in her perspective as well. Anuja, you know, what is disappointing is, do you think people are not getting the, you know, it's not just the fact that people owe it to women, but also there's sound economic rationale. I mean, you know, survey after survey, study after study has shown that employing more women, you know, will lead to more growth. I mean, I can quote this McKinsey study, which clearly points out that by bringing more women to work, there's a significant upside. It could add 2% to the country's GDP, $700 billion by 2025 by bridging the gender divide. Women today contribute only about 17% to India's GDP. That's a huge deficit that we need to bridge. At one level, do you feel that corporations and stakeholders do not even realize that there is, you know, above all, economic rationale to empower women, to get more women in the workforce?
See, I think it's a bunch of things, and you know, there is the very large scale at which you talk about these things, but at a very personal level, in that, you know, just a person who works in an office and brings that perspective to this debate. Sure. I think it's just that women, we are bad negotiators. Even if we are hired at the same level as everybody else, we tend to not hang in there as long. We tend to guilt ourselves out, you know, we do not manage to shift from job to job and get that little jump. You know, we tend to stay in stable jobs and pick something safer. That is the tendency. We get guilt tripped into saying, you know, you went home because your child was sick, therefore you're not worthy of a pay rise like your, you know, a male colleague maybe. We tend to settle. In India, a woman is always used to getting a smaller share of everything. You know, firstly, to begin with, there are lesser women born in India than there are men. We see those depressing ratios every year because of, you know, the feticide and the fact that you don't get enough food. So anyway, there are less women to begin with. Then on top of that is the fact that anyway in the country there's like a crisis, you know, unemployment is a huge thing in the last few years. So obviously you're bearing the brunt of that. Then on top of that, there is all the other stuff. We tend to work in industries that are paid lower. Then we tend to guilt trip ourselves, we settle for less, we negotiate badly, and we drop out. And as the climb goes higher and higher, and there, you know, there are lesser jobs towards the, you know, towards the top of the pyramid, is when we tend to not throw our hat in for these big jobs, because then our work-life balance sort of shifts, and we are trained to think that that is the work-life balance, and I always have to choose my family over my job. That's how we all think. And we can say something else in advertising and in PR and in political discussions, but our TV shows again and again glamorize the woman who stays at home. Those are the heroines that are fed to our girls and women every day on a daily basis. We are saying it's a year of the girl child. At the same time, we are telling girls, don't go out in sleeveless clothes, bhai, no cell phone for you. I mean, so there's all that going on. So I think we are self-effacing, we tend to take the back seat, and we just do not ask hak se mango. You know, we do not ask for what we deserve. We are too embarrassed, we don't think we are worthy. And that is just something that just perpetuates. So I think the thing is that we have to help ourselves also. Beyond the point, you know, the government can try and help and the Niti Aayog can try and help.
Right. Right. I think Anuja Chauhan makes a point there, but I'm going to ask Kiran Majumdar-Shaw to answer that question. As one of the most powerful women in a boardroom here in India and in the world now, Ms. Shaw, I'm going to ask you this question. Are women bad negotiators? Are we too hard on ourselves? Why do we shy away from talking about money? We are almost apologetic when it comes to asking for a raise as much as we need. Are women perhaps harder on themselves than anybody else is?
I think it just boils down to the fact that we are underrepresented wherever we are in the workspace. And I think a larger presence of women will actually make us far more confident to ask for our rightful claims. But I think having said that, I think I really believe that we need to see a much greater representation of women at all levels. And I'm glad that at least, you know, in corporate India, you know, it mandates that you have at least one woman director on the board. Now, I think we need to have a, you know, corporate governance structure that pays a lot of attention to gender diversity as well, because this is something that we must encourage as good governance as well, because we keep focusing on other aspects of governance, but I think diversity and gender diversity at that is also a part of this good governance. If you do not actually have an affirmative action in terms of employing women in the workplace and making sure that you also focus on leadership development within women, I don't think you will quite get there. So, if you look at other countries who have actually done better than us, I'm not even talking about the Nordic countries, but I'm even talking about other countries. You look at a country like Rwanda. I mean, Rwanda seems to have been, has done better than us. So I think Philippines has done better than us. So I think these are the kind of examples we need to look at and see how come they have got a much better understanding of the gender gap and have bridged that gender gap, and what is it that we need to do to bridge that gap. Because I don't think it's rocket science. I think, like, you know, we've just discussed, I think the health index amongst maternal health is appalling. I think we just don't bother about women's health issues. And I think in everything women are shortchanged, right from birth. I think women are shortchanged when it comes to education, when it comes to health, when it comes to, you know, employment, when it comes to economic empowerment. We are shortchanging our women all the time. So it's really an issue that we must address with a lot of seriousness.
Lalita Kumaramanglam, comment on that. You know, when a country like Rwanda can get it right, I mean, you know, when Bangladesh can probably get it right, from a policy making point of view, why is it that we can't get it right? And I understand there are various enablers. For one, it is providing, you know, transport infrastructure, allowing women to access markets. That's one of the reasons which is seen as a deterrent for women from entering the workforce. We don't have stable, you know, transport infrastructure in place in the country, especially in rural India. But from a policy intervention point of view, what do you think is needed? What is it that we can learn from a country like Rwanda and maybe even Bangladesh?
Rwanda basically has got reservation of women in their parliament. They have a minimum of 33%, not just seats allotted to them, but seats allotted to them in parliament. That is, that percentage of women have to win and come in as members. And that has been there for quite a few years, and it's made a huge difference in the policies, the gender-friendly policies that that country has introduced. So we in India, all women across the board are waiting for reservation, and unfortunately it hasn't taken place all these years. Again, I'd like to emphasize it has nothing to do with party, it's just that we are still an extremely patriarchal country. With regard to things like women staying in work, the fact is that gender and child-friendly policies at workplaces, even in corporate India, are not really in place. The recent introduction of the maternity law will help, but the point is that India doesn't lack laws. What we lack is the implementation of these laws. The mindset, I'm sorry to say this, not just in the government or in the informal sector, but also in the corporate sector, quite often is that if I have to give a woman 180 days leave, why would I employ her and train her, etc. Forgetting that women generally tend to be more loyal, like they say, like an earlier panelist said, they don't shift jobs very often. Attrition rates are much lower with trained women. And the fact is also that, you know, we need to make women aware of their worth. In this country, most women hesitate. They don't know that they can actually, or that they don't believe themselves. It's not just a question of knowledge, that we are worth as much as our male colleague who's doing the same job and probably ask for an increase in salary. We don't want to rock the boat. And you'll see that unfortunately in women, in India now, women above the age of 35, 40, 45, they started dropping out. There's too much family pressure on these women to take up family responsibilities. And you know, women in India are born and brought up saying that your job as a mother, as a wife, as a daughter, as a sister, a sister-in-law, etc. is extremely important, and unfortunately too many women also buy into it. Sometimes it's, you know, not out of choice, sometimes despite wanting to actually make a contribution and continue with their jobs, they are forced to let it go. We do need more gender-friendly policies. Compulsory creches have become a rule, but I think hardly any companies have creches. Right. Even at the NCW, I had such a fight to set up one. And you know, there are many such things that can be said. I'd also like to say that we need to also skill our women. You know, merely education is not enough. We need to train our women in financial matters, in marketing matters, in actually how to negotiate a sale, even if they're just tiny producers. Women are not being given the skills to become economic entrepreneurs or economic giants in which I think they can do. Just look at our panelist Kiran Majumdar-Shaw. You know, and we need people to mentor women.
You're making very relevant
women
points
need to be mentored in many ways.
You're making very relevant points there. Ms. Kumar Mangalam, you're making very relevant points there, but we want to keep this interactive because we have a plethora of calls that are coming in from our viewers as well. Before I go to one such call, Priyanka Chaturvedi, one of the points that Ms. Kumar Mangalam did make is that a women's reservation bill is in Parliament. When will it pass? I mean, I understand that India can at least boast of the fact that on political empowerment we are very high, but the truth of the matter is we are living off the Indira Gandhi legacy. We are high because the first Indian Prime Minister to debut here was in 1966. And, you know, we haven't moved on that. In fact, this report very categorically says fresh women leadership has to be nurtured for India to retain that position. 11% of our parliament is women, and that is all of 2014, only 11%. When will we see political consensus on the women's reservation bill?
Absolutely. No, I think we have very categorically, if you would see, even the political participation of women increased only when we introduced it through Panchayati Raj amendments, and we saw many women come forward and participate right at the local level. Like somebody said before me, that it has to go up to the centre, up to the parliament, and we have gone on record. We have Mrs. Gandhi, our Congress president, has written to the Prime Minister saying that if you introduce this bill, you have our total support, because it is important that women become a part of the system, part of the political space, have a voice, shape policies for the country. And you can see a very I would say a very participative democracy if it takes everybody's voices into policy making space. So we are very committed to it. We passed it in the Rajya Sabha. It was unfortunate that it did not pass through the Lok Sabha. And we would hope that BJP, which is in power right now and is the single largest party majority, would pay heed to our request and introduce it as a bill and ensure that it turns into an act and we see more women participants in the political space as well.
Will have a trickle-down effect. Let's take a view from a caller as well. Jagdish Kumar calls in from Rajasthan. Mr. Kumar, please go ahead and ask your question.
Yes, thanks. First and foremost, I just wanted to thank the entire ET Now team that they have raised this kind of issue and raised a debate on the national front. My question is straightway, there is a clear disparity in man and women recruitment. There is a lot of applications every time recruitment opens in a public sector undertaking, but while they are started recruiting, they just separate out the women recruitments, the women aspirants who they are applying for the job, particular job, in technical, non-technical, all the aspects. But why? This is a set of mind we need to change. This is the hypocrisy.
Okay,
that's what my question is.
Okay, you've raised a very valid point, and while we don't have someone from the sort of public sector in the panel, but let me pose this to Ms. Kiran Majumdar-Shaw on this bias when it comes to recruitment, and he's saying largely in the case of public sector undertakings where equally competent men and women and the women get differentiated at. How do you address this problem, Mr. Shaw, at the public sector? And I'm sure it's sort of there even in private sector, maybe not in large companies, but in a lot of other companies, this inherent bias at the stage of recruitment where you have a male candidate and a female candidate, and at that level the bias is in favor of opting for a male candidate. How do you get over that bias?
The only way of getting over that bias is to have a reservation or an affirmative action to recruit more women, because if all things being equal, I think you should actually encourage women to be brought into the workforce. So I just believe that even though the word reservation doesn't resonate well with most people, I really believe that there is a negative selection when it comes to women, and therefore you need affirmative action. And I think, you do need to focus on reservation in that sense, because just like we are saying that we want a larger representation in Parliament, I think the same holds true for the public service as well.
Ms. Shaw, as one of the most important and influential voices of corporate India, will you support affirmative action in the private sector for women's reservation?
Well, you know, in our own, I think every, reputable company in this country realizes the importance of gender diversity. And I think every, corporate, company in corporate India is really trying to see how they can bring about this gender diversity with a lot of affirmative action. I know that every HR division in most corporate companies try to see how they can actually, focus on getting more women into the workplace. So there is a lot of sincere effort being made to improve the gender diversity in the workplace. And I think there are many efforts now in many organizations to see how they can develop these women into leadership roles. It's going to happen over a period of time. But you know, as someone mentioned earlier on, there are a lot of issues. I mean, there are societal issues where, you know, as women sort of rise in the organization, very often they have to sort of leave the organization because they take a long break to start a family. Sometimes, certain families don't want young women to sort of work. There are a lot of issues. So, whilst on one hand, yes, women who remain in organizations are very loyal to the organization and the attrition levels are very low, but on the other hand, a lot of young women who enter the workforce exit the workforce also very soon, and the attrition level again becomes quite high. So I think we need to look at this in a different way. And I, for one, definitely believe that a large part of corporate India is taking a lot of good steps to sort of bridging this gender gap.
Let's get an outside view on that. Anuja Chauhan, comment on that. Do you believe that corporate India has been taking enough proactive steps? Yes, the large companies maybe, but corporate India as a whole, do you believe is taking enough proactive steps to A, recruit women, B, retain women, and C, re-recruit women who were to take a break from, from workforce for family reasons, and then when they want to come back, are there, is corporate India proactive enough with participation of women?
Well, I think they start off very strong, and I think their intentions are very good, and they always go in there saying we'll try and get women in. But then I think they end up trying to play a little safe in the sense, if you're going to work late hours, then you'll have to drop these girls home. These are the factors that play on their mind. And as you get to the middle level, and girls start having children, and women like to leave home on time, so 5:30 if you pick up your bag and go, then eyebrows are raised and it's like you should stay back, there's a meeting, and it's always made into, it becomes like a kind of a boys club. After 5:30, people are smoking, they're playing pool, you're supposedly working and you stay, and it's considered really very hardworking and committed of you to stay that long. And girls tend to say, look, if I put in my 9 o'clock to my 6 o'clock and I give it my 100%, I can jolly well go home at 6 p.m. But that is frowned upon, and then all those kinds of things start building up because corporate India does have this, we're working American hours and we get calls at all times of day and night. So I think even though they want to do it, it becomes harder to implement. And then those guys have their own pressures, right? So whoever is the person who's doing that recruitment or who's running that office, he has to deal with that kind of pressure. And the re-recruitment is really terrible because I think once you've had a baby and you've been out there for a while and stuff, and I think girls at that point also are very conflicted. And like I said, people guilt trip us very easily. Even at home, we just carry the guilt around. At home you're guilty because you were at work, and at work you're guilty because you went to the PTA meeting, and it just plays out like that. And people just eat away at your insecurity. So I think that corporate India is trying, but I don't think they're trying enough. And I think a lot of it is just lip service beyond the point.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with you on the guilt trip bit. You're at work, you're constantly thinking about what you're missing at home. You're at home, you're constantly resonating with what you've missed at work. Somehow relate to that. But I think on this note, we've just got to take a really quick breather. We come back and put the spotlight on the unpaid work, the amount of work that women do and are unpaid for as compared to men. We also put the spotlight on how do you make a comeback if you've taken a break in your career. Is that easy at all, and can that be made easy? Back in a moment from now. This is an emotive issue. You've got to keep it with ET Now. Welcome back. You're watching the India Development Debate, and we're putting the spotlight on the gender gap where India has actually slipped 21 positions since last year. Abha Singh, I must actually point this out to you, and I want to take this question up with you. As far as, nurturing is concerned, and the panel, I'm glad, has spoken from their heart. Women feel guilty because they're losing out on their children being raised. They feel guilty about spending a lot of time away from home and all of that. But the question also is that there is an inequitable distribution of domestic workforce on women. I mean, 66% of the work, statistics prove me, I'm not saying this, 66% of the work that women do is unpaid for compared to just 12% for a man. How can those things be set right? Can they be set right at all? Because it's not as if a woman who's staying at home is not working and the one who's been at work for about 9-10 hours is really counting. A lot of domestic work happens that goes unpaid for. That's never paid. Traditionally never has been and perhaps never will. But what sort of interventions can be made to perhaps consider that as work?
Exactly. The Constitution clearly provides for prohibition of discrimination. That's a fundamental right. I mean, nobody can be discriminated on grounds of religion, race or sex. And here, because you're a woman, you are paid less. And the domestic work, of course, is not quantified. It is not quantified. There is no salary, and it is understood and presumed that a wife would work in the house unpaid. But if you quantify that, then I'm sure the woman would outwork the men as far as payments are concerned. But another very one important issue which we are missing out is that women do not have property in their name. I mean, in Karnataka, if you go by, which is the progressive state, barely 20 to 25% have property in their name. And because women do not have property in their name, it is very difficult for them to get loans to set up their own work or a small whatever they want to set up, a small cottage industry. So, in fact, for that, I would say I would thank the Supreme Court, because now only inheritance laws have been changed, like women can inherit ancestral property, women can be a karta. So these are the laws which will have a long-term effect, and once women have property in their name, it is also seen there is that the spousal violence in domestic household is less if a woman owes property. So these are the issues which are also very important, which would empower women in the long run, and domestic payments must be made. I mean, because that would give them self-respect also, because a man would come and say, oh, you've just rested in the house the whole day, I have worked out for 10 hours, not knowing that the woman has been sweeping, cleaning, teaching and everything. And not only that, even if she is working, when she comes home, she has to do the domestic work. So I think that needs to be quantified, and the Labour Department, which goes and surveys it, the Ministry of Child and Women and Child Development should look into it and quantify these at least for symbolic measures, so that a woman can have self-esteem that this would have been my earning if I was doing these many hours of work which I have done at home and not being paid for and not even being respected for. So that is a major thing which would empower women if we quantify, and I think NCW can take this up with Women and Child Development Ministry, that this unpaid labor and in the farmhouse, in the rural areas, I would say in farming, women are seldom paid equal to the men. In fact, it is less than half. So that at least Ministry of Agriculture can look into and ensure, make it penal provisions if you don't pay equal pay, because it's a directive principle, equal pay for equal work, make it a fundamental right.
Okay, you've raised a valid point there, but I think Lalita Kumar Mangalam, I want you to come in on the point that both Ms. Kiran Mazumdar Shaw and Ms. Anuja Chauhan made, which is on the fact that the women who retreat from the workforce and want to come back and don't have enough opportunities, and that is a very worrying trend. If you look at data over the last sort of decade or so, the participation of women in the workforce has actually dropped substantially from about 35% to 23%, partly because women in rural areas are now educating themselves, and so that accounts for some part of this withdrawal, but also because a lot of the women have withdrawn from the organized workforce. And how do you arrest that trend? How do you ensure that there are opportunities for women to come back into the corporate sector, a few years after they take a break for maternity? If they want to come back, how do you ensure that there are enough opportunities and that they are not discriminated against for being out of the workforce for the period of 2 or 3 or whatever years there may be? Lalita Kumar Mangalam.
Basically, what you need to do is to provide facilities that can bring them back. Most importantly, creches, not just for small children, but also daycare for children who's above the age of 4 to say about 12. You know, when they shouldn't and can't really be left at home alone. Secondly, we need to also educate women about their rights, and we need to of course change the mindset of this country, where families expect women to take the burden of all home care, whether it's cooking or other domestic work, or even the care of older aged people. You know, we need to have facilities in place that both private sector and government will have to contribute to, where you ensure that women can come back to work without a sense of guilt. I think today the sense of guilt that all of us speak about is almost now built into our DNA. But we must make efforts to try and decrease that so that women can come back to work. Also the fact that, you know, the mindset that we think that a woman's contribution economically is not as important as that of a man. Traditionally, most households in this country, regardless of, you know, many of all other factors, seem to always think that it's okay if the woman gives up her job, but not okay if the man gives up his job. There are a lot of factors around this. Also, I think the government, the role governments can play here, both state and central, is that we see that the laws that have so far been passed are mandatorily followed. Even corporate India doesn't follow it. Many governments themselves, especially at state level, don't follow it. You know, we must remember that we have the concurrent list, the state list and the central list. There are many subjects which the centre, beyond a point, we can only give a directive. We can't mandatorily tell the states you must do this. As you pointed out, in Karnataka, which has a very gender friendly environment and has for many years, the ownership of assets of women is 25%, but nationally it's just 2%. Women who work in agriculture, especially in tiny and small holdings, that is holdings less than an acre, is about 80% of what acreage holdings in India is. Average 80% is less than an acre. They work on it, but they don't get a salary, and the land is never in their names. So they have no access to government benefits. These are several of the things that need to be looked at, you know, in minutiae by all governments, and that will help in retaining and bringing women back to the workforce.
Yes. So, I'm glad we are finding solutions to this debate as well. But I've got my next caller, and unfortunately, she doesn't want to give out her name, but she does want to make a point here. She's a caller from Mumbai, I'm told. Go ahead, ma'am.
Hi. What I think is a very important thing in corporate India today. Unfortunately, government in its wisdom has increased maternity benefits. But this has become a liability for women because most people believe that women need to be punished if they are bearing children, and that for 6 months these women are going to enjoy free salary, and there is nothing that women can do about it. There is absolutely nothing. I know of places where managements have said get rid of women because they are pregnant and are not going to be of any productive use to the company. And editors write columns quite shamelessly, may I say, about how this is going to lead to this maternity benefits are going to act as a bias against women, and it's true. I didn't believe it when actually this was written in newspapers, but I see it being played out. When IT companies want to sack people, they first identify women, and Cognizant is a clear culprit in that, when it's been reported by various publications as well, that they let go of women because they are saving a quote-unquote breadwinner. What are we talking about? Government introduces rules which are used against women.
Right. You've just made your point there, and I think that's a very valid point that has been made. That was one of the concerns that was being raised even when that thing did come in. And that debate is going on. But Kiran Majumdar Shah, I'd like you to answer that query, and I would like you to answer the anguish that our female caller feels there, that the 6-month maternity is almost turning out to be a curse, because a woman is looked at as a liability, almost as if she's going to enjoy those 6 months, whereas those are going to be sleepless nights for most young mothers.
No, I completely agree with her apprehensions, and she's absolutely right about this particular attitude that corporate India takes on maternity leave, and these very, very unfair practices that they indulge in when it comes to you know, women, pregnant women, or you know, when it comes to scaling down jobs, the women lose their jobs the first. She's absolutely right about all this. But you know, I just think that organizations that have good gender diversity are the ones that do better. And I really hope that you know, companies that actually have a great diversity policy, that have great gender inclusion, can actually set an example for those who don't. And there needs to be some way of showcasing companies with better gender diversity and gender policies, you know, and the performance of these companies vis-a-vis those who don't. So I think it's extremely important. I have no really quick answers for that, because I think it is a genuine concern, and it's up to companies being educated and enlightened about the need to make sure that you understand, you know, very gender sensitive issues. I think you know, there are so many gender sensitive issues, but this maternity leave is certainly one of them. And as an organization, you know, I know that we are very sensitive about these issues, and we certainly would make sure that, you know, no negative action would be taken because of that. But on the other hand, there are many companies who do it. I have no answers, I must admit, but I think having affirmative action, having policies that celebrate gender inclusion and incentivize gender inclusion is the only way forward.
Anuja Chauhan, comment on that. Is there a solution to this, or is it just that, you know, we need more women leaders, we need more CEOs, you know, leading companies, we need more women as HR managers, as HR heads who could sort of, you know, pluck this at the, you know, nip the bud, so to say, and not allow this sort of culture to breed in corporate India? Because like our caller pointed out, I'm sure it's not in 1-2 companies, but in many companies, large, small, and I dread to think about what would be in small companies actually. You know, so what's the solution really? Is it to just encourage more women leaders to get to the top? And even there, of course, there's a challenge. I mean, look at the number of women directors in corporate India. Only 13% of directors in corporate India and NSE listed companies are women.
No, you're right. It's huge. And I think this is not just something that we can fight by talking to men or talking to corporates or to the government. It's also a cultural war that needs to be won, you know, and we need to put these, women are missing role models, whether real ones or fictitious ones. And coming back to the point I made about the TV channels, if we're talking about reservations, we can have reservations for government posts, you know, and for parliament. We can also have reservations on television channels. If Star Plus, Colors, Z, all these people have to do one show, one primetime show at least on the lines of Kyonki Saas Bhi Kabhi CEO Thi. You know, you actually, in all seriousness, we need to put that stuff out there. And that is something that will, you know, sort of go into women's heads, make them feel more entitled and, you know, more proud of their different ways of working, and not just being this santur woman, look, I have a job, look, I'm beautiful, you know. We get caught up in all those little things, and these big issues then just confound us completely, and we tend to panic and pick a safe path, you know. So we need those role models out there, and we need them everywhere. We need to see those women who are going out there and who are doing their thing, and that will empower everybody. And I think we need that in culture as well as in policy.
Actually, you know, I'm going to say this on national television. I really think politicians have fared better as far as female participation is concerned. You look at the things around you. Some of the most powerful politicians in this country are women. But Priyanka Chaturvedi will let you have the last word then. Is this the role model that politicians must play for the rest of the society? This whole mindset, societal change will have to be brought about. Like Anuja Chauhan says, Kyonki Saas Bhi Kabhi CEO Thi, she's just not a santur woman after all.
Absolutely. I've been a huge fan of Anuja's books and her ad campaigns, and today what she has spoken is exactly what I feel. And I totally agree with her when she says that the TV content also needs to look at women as competitors, as equal competitors with equal opportunities, doing a brilliant job as CEOs. I remember during my growing up years, we used to have a program called Udaan on television, which used to really inspire me to achieve better things in life, make me more aspirational aspirational. So maybe if we have some things like that, content like this on television, we are going to make a huge impact on in our society, because television happens to be the biggest medium of instrument of change as well. So I am totally in agreement with what Anuja has spoken.
Okay, I'm afraid we're completely out of time. You know, this debate could have gone on, and I hope we will have another occasion to do this and get this wonderful panel to talk about this issue. But thank you so much for joining us live on ET Now. Ms. Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw, Ms. Anuja Chauhan, Priyanka Chaturvedi, Abha Singh, and of course Ms. Rita Kumar Mangalam. Thank you so much for sparing the time and joining us for this debate right here on ET Now. This debate, viewers, is not about apportioning blame. It's not about offering sermons. It's about acknowledging that we've got a problem that we just can't turn a blind eye to. 68% of women who graduate don't have paid jobs. This is as much your problem as it's mine. It's as much the government's problem as it is of India Inc. Denial won't take us anywhere.
Indeed, tonight we have made an attempt at finding some real solutions to this problem. There probably are even better solutions out there, and let's go ahead and find them. Let's change policies, let's change mindsets, but above all, let's change the reality. India must not fail her women. Thank you very, very much for being with us on this edition of the India Development Debate this evening. Up next, Stop to the 10.